A shadow is a lesser version of something that's real. A shadow, think about it, is still accurate, but it's a representation of something of substance. The job of a shadow is to point beyond itself onto something else. God establishes His word, His rule, His law. By what standard? By that standard. A mediator, He has to give a representative for us because we're so sinful. You can't approach a holy God. What are you going to do? You need a priest in your place. You need someone to go in your place. And then God has to provide the means by which the covenants can be fulfilled. All of this is God-given. All of this is God-initiated. God has to do it all. And we know that all of it is pointing forward. Two places today, 1 Samuel 6, where we are going to be working through our text in our next section, but then also Exodus 25, as I had Aaron read. So two places, 1 Samuel 6 and then Exodus 25. Today, I want to talk about shadows. I want to talk about shadows because the Bible talks about shadows. And I want to just have a working definition so that we understand what we're talking about before I kind of go into these things. For our purposes today, we'll do kind of a simplistic definition. A shadow is just a lesser version of something that's real. Say that one more time. A shadow is a lesser version of something that's real. Okay? A shadow, think about it, is still accurate. A shadow is still accurate, but it's a representation of something of substance. Whenever you see a shadow, you know that something real is casting that shadow. So shadow is a lesser version of something that's real, but a shadow has one job, and it always points beyond itself. The job of a shadow is to point beyond itself onto something else. In our world, everyday life, we live with shadows all the time, right? One example. If you have ever been in the dating world, right, us marrieds in the room, if you've ever been in the dating scene, if you are in the dating scene presently, or if you will one day be in the dating scene, you do not date for no reason, right? You don't date with nothing in mind. Every dating scenario always points beyond itself. We might call it a shadow, pointing beyond itself to a substantive relationship. Now, that is not to say that a dating relationship is not real, that it's not a meaningful interaction, it's not sincere, it's not all of those things. But the point of dating was always to point beyond itself to substance. And we would call that a marriage relationship, right? We can see this. Turns out, in our world too, marriage itself is also a shadow. If you think about this, right? Now, marriage is a shadow. It's a step closer. It's a step deeper than a dating relationship. No question about that. But marriage ultimately points to beyond itself. And where is it pointing? To Jesus Christ and His marriage of His bride, what He calls the church, that marriage, that covenantal relationship will last for eternity. So if you're married in this room, congratulations, you've been brought in. Every marriage that has ever existed on the planet, the institution of marriage has been brought in so that you could do a dress rehearsal. You could be a living example of what it's going to look like when Christ marries His bride. That's why marriage exists. You thought it was about you and fulfillment and happiness, right? So did I. When I was younger, no one told me this stuff. I was like, man, I'm getting married as though that's the destination. Well, it kind of is in one sense, but in another sense, a much deeper sense, there's an eternal reality here that's playing out right in front of our eyes. It's a shadow. The church itself, think about this. The church itself is a shadow. Right? We're here. Listen, real work takes place in here. No question. We're worshiping the King of the universe, and that's not fake. Real stuff happens right here. Real stuff happens right here. Real stuff is happening in your lives in this building as a community together. But this is a shadow. This is a shadow that points to the day when all of God's people will be together and they will worship together the King face to face. That's why you were made. You were made to worship the King face to face. We act like the scenario that we're in right now, this separated state, is how it was intended. We weren't made for this. This is a shadow. One day we're going to worship the King face to face. The book of Samuel is full of shadows. We've already seen several of them. If you remember, if you've been here from the beginning, we've already seen a shadow of the priesthood, right? By the high priest named Eli. Now, why is that a shadow? Well, the entire priesthood in general, this is the idea that God sends a representative that would represent the people to God. There's this barrier between the people and God because of sin. And that was always pointing beyond itself. The priesthood was always pointing beyond itself. We're pointing to the one-day mediator where God himself will be the mediator. That's in the form of Jesus Christ and the man Jesus Christ. We've seen the shadow of the people of God. Think about this. Israel as a nation back in 1 Samuel's day, it's a shadow of even the people of God. Have you ever thought about this? Abrahamic covenant speaking wise, the goal is always to be Jew and Gentile, but in this day, in Samuel's day, we only have the Jewish people as the people of God. That's a shadow looking forward when Gentiles will be included as well. We've seen a shadow of the tabernacle. There's going to be a temple to come, and we are living in a day. Have you ever thought about the day that you live in? The new covenant era? We don't go to a tabernacle. We don't go to a temple. Now we are the temple of God. Have you ever thought about how crazy that is? How absolutely crazy that God lives in you? But it's all we've ever known. So I think we miss the weight. But in Samuel's day, the book that we're in, this was a shadow time. We've also seen the shadow of the Ark of the Covenant. Now, what is the shadow of the Ark of the Covenant? Well, the Ark of the Covenant is a picture, or this is a shadow that points to a substance, and that substance would be the throne of God himself. And I want to take some time today to deal with the Ark of the Covenant, because that's where Samuel's going to take us, Samuel 6. I want to not assume. Sometimes we assume a lot in kind of maybe church settings like this, where we kind of assume that I think we're all on the same page, or that we're all just, tracking or whatever, and we're all in different stages, and that's kind of how God's designed things, and that's okay. But I just want to orient us back to the Ark of the Covenant today for just a little bit before we jump into actually the text in 1 Samuel 6, okay? Because here's the better question. I could ask the question, what is the Ark of the Covenant? And that's fine. We all have our own mindsets that come to mind. If I said to you right now, rhetorically, what is the Ark of the Covenant? We all are thinking about something. Something comes in our minds. But what I want to know, right, the better question might be, what did they understand the Ark of the Covenant to be? What is Scripture's perspective of the Ark of the Covenant? Now we're in the right question. That's a good question. And so I just want to take a moment today to do that. How did ancient Israel view the Ark of the Covenant? That's a good question. So I want to jump into Exodus. Jump with me. Exodus 25, because I just want to start us where the Bible starts us and give us a reminder of the ark. I'm just going to read a few verses. Hold my place there in Samuel. All right, so we're going to start in verse 10. So Exodus 25, verse 10, here's what it says. I'm going to read fast, so just kind of track with me here. 25, starting in verse 10. They shall make an ark of acacia wood, 2 cubits and a half shall be its length, 1 cubit and a half its breadth, and 1 cubit and a half its height. You shall overlay it with pure gold, inside and outside shall you overlay it, and you shall make on it a molding of gold around it. You shall cast 4 rings of gold for it, and put them on its 4 feet, 2 rings on the one side of it, and 2 rings on the other side of it. You shall make poles of acacia wood, and overlay them with gold. And you shall put poles into the rings on the sides of the ark to carry the ark by them. The poles shall remain in the rings of the ark, they shall not be taken from it. And you shall put into the ark the testimony that I shall give you. You shall make a mercy seat of gold. 2 cubits and a half shall be its length, and 1 cubit and a half its breadth. And you shall make 2 cherubim of gold, of hammered work shall you make them, on the 2 ends of the mercy seat. Make 1 cherub on the one end, and 1 cherub on the other end. Of one piece with the mercy seat shall you make the cherub on its 2 ends. The cherubim shall spread out its wings above, overshadowing the mercy seat with their wings, their faces one to another. Toward the mercy seat shall the faces of the cherubim be. And you shall put the mercy seat on top of the ark, and in the ark you shall put the testimony that I shall give you. There I will meet with you, and from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubim that are on the ark of the testimony, I will speak with you about all that I will give you in commandment for the people of Israel. 22, one more time. There I will meet with you, and from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubim that are on the ark of the testimony, I will speak with you about all that I will give you in commandment for the people of Israel. The Ark of the Covenant is not a piece of furniture, right? It's not just furniture. This has to do, think about this with me, this has to do with Israel's identity. Its very heartbeat, right? This has to do with Israel's story, its DNA. And I was thinking this week as I was kind of working through this text, and I'm thinking, do we have an example of this in America? Like, do we have anything that even comes close? I came up with an example. You might just have to judge for yourself if you think it fits. I don't think it's very good, because I'm not sure that there is a good example, but you just tell me. Imagine if a foreign country came into America, let's say China. Imagine China came into America and conquered America, subjugated us, we became their slaves. And as a trophy, they went and they took the Constitution of the United States. They took our document, our founding documents, and they put it over the hearth, as it were, of China. They put it as this trophy piece in China somewhere. Now, if that were to happen, in a sense, it would be like feeling there's a piece of me that's over there. There's this document represents who we are as a people. It separates us, it distinguishes us between all of the countries that have ever existed on the planet. And so in one sense, it would be like there's a piece of me in this other country, and they're doing it as a parade, as this trophy to say, we own America. Now, this is a bad example, right? Because here's what I would never equate. The substance of let's say, the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, I would never equate that substance with the same as the Ark of the Covenant. However, it's the best example I can come up with. So if you can come up with another one, better one, please let me know. But this idea of being wrapped up in identity, I don't know that we can overemphasize enough that the Ark of the Covenant to Israel was their DNA. It was who they were. When Israel, right, leaves Mount Sinai, they have the tablets with them, they have the Ten Commandments, and they have the Ark of the Covenant. They go. And when do they go? They go when God leaves, they leave. They follow God. God goes first. When the ark went into the Jordan River, the waters parted. Why? Because God was leading them into the Promised Land. It was at Jericho when the Ark of the Covenant went around the city multiple times. What happens? The walls come down. Why? Because Yahweh was striking the first blow in battle. When the ark came to rest in the Holy of Holies, right, in the tabernacle, later the temple, we have now a center of Israel's worship and their identity and their life. Don't think of the temple as a church building. It's not the same. This is the center of who they were. So the question becomes, if this is an artist's rendition of the ark, does anybody know a little bit of Bible trivia? What was inside? Hint. Here's one hint. 3 items. Anybody want to take a stab at it? It's okay if you don't know. Come on, man. Let's go ahead. I've heard some. 10 Commandments for sure is in there. I missed it. Manna for sure. Good one. That's one I didn't think anybody would get. And Aaron's staff. Okay, good. So we have 10 Commandments. We have the actual law. We have Aaron's staff that had blossomed, right, even though it was a staff. And then we have a jar of manna. And that's what Hebrews 9 tells us. Now, why those things? These are shadows. But why those things? Well, I think that what we can see right away is that you have God's covenant word established here. You have representation of the covenant priesthood. And then you have a representation of covenant provision. Now, what does this mean? That means, think about this. God establishes His word, His rule, His law. By what standard? By that standard. That's the standard. He has to give a mediator. He has to give a representative for us because we're so sinful. You can't approach a holy God. What are you going to do? You need a priest in your place. You need someone to go in your place. And then God has to provide the means by which the covenants can be fulfilled. All of this is God-given. All of this is God-initiated. God has to do it all. And we know that all of it is pointing forward. All of it is pointing forward. So spiritually, if this is what is being carried around in the ark, spiritually speaking and nationally speaking, for Israel, the ark of the covenant is God with us. Truly. So that's what's inside the ark. But the ark itself is also a shadow. It has some shadows with it associated. So I just want to walk us through a couple of these. The ark itself has some shadows. First one, and there's probably many more, but I just picked out 3 for time's sake. We have a shadow of God's throne here. Now I want you to track with me on this. The ark was not a magic box, right? I loved the movie, but Indiana Jones got it wrong, right? They got it wrong. This is not a magic box here. Sorry, Aaron, didn't mean to spoil it there. The Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of God, is not something that can be leveraged or manipulated by human will. God can never be leveraged or manipulated by human will. Never. He is totally and completely sovereign. He is so separate that His will is what will be done. So you have this shadow that it's pointing to here, and Scripture is so weighty on this discussion. In fact, over and over again, it will say this. It will say, the Lord is enthroned above the cherubim. There's multiple passages, I just listed them there, that is enthroned. And so He's not just there, He's enthroned, and I think that's a key word. He's enthroned above the cherubim. What does that mean? That means these guys here, these cherubim, this golden stuff on top, this is not decoration. This is not like religious art. This is a picture of something. This is a shadow. And it's a picture of heaven's royal court. In other words, the same angelic beings that Isaiah saw, saying, holy, 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 right, around the throne. The same living creatures John saw in Revelation, surrounding God's glory. The ark is giving a picture on earth of what is actually taking place, really happening in heaven. It's a picture. The ark is the shadow of heaven's substance. Got to think of this in terms of shadow and substance. Then you have David. You have David in 1 Chronicles 28. He'll come a step further and he'll say that the Ark of the Covenant, that this was a footstool of God, which I think is an interesting thing. I think it's worth our time thinking about this. Now, think with me here. It's a footstool, but if there's going to be a footstool, then there has to be a throne above it, right? That's pretty basic. We see what he's saying here. But David knew that this wasn't the ark, wasn't God's throne. This wasn't where God was. This was God's footstool. Why is that significant? This was the place where heaven touched earth. This is God saying, right, to His people, I am not a regional deity. Right? I'm not bound to a location. You will never put me in a box. I am your king. My reign is over heaven, and it's the same reign that's over you. You are my people, and my presence will go with you. You want proof that I'm with you? Here's my footstool. That's what you get. You'll be my people, and I'll be your God. You feel the weight of this? This isn't just a religious artifact here. This is Israel's entire life, their identity, their worship, their battles, their experiences. All of it is here. It only made sense underneath this throne. You take away this ark, you take away their identity. The ark was the covenant reminder. Yahweh reigns, and this people belongs to me. I mean, have you thought, we've already gone over this portion, so we're not going to go back, but did you think about back in the earlier chapters how bizarre it would be? That when Eli, right, the high priest, he gets word that Israel loses the battle, if you remember, he also gets word that both of his sons are dead. And when he hears that the ark was taken, he falls over dead. Phinehas, right, one of his sons, his wife, when she hears that Israel loses the battle, she hears that her husband is dead, he's been killed, but when she hears the ark has been captured, she goes into premature labor. And she names her son what? Anybody? Say it like you mean it. I didn't hear. I think I heard it. Good. And in Hebrew, kavod, glory, kavod, without glory. She doesn't name the son after the father who just died. She names it after the ark being taken. Kavod. I mean, is there an equivalent in our culture? I don't think so. But can you imagine, let's say, Lord forbid, you have a spouse who gets involved in a carjacking, and in the context of that scenario, this spouse dies, and the car was stolen. Listed among your tragedies for that day would not be, and my car's gone. What am I going to do with my car now? That gets completely overshadowed by this idea of your spouse. Not with them. The ark is so central to who they are as a people, so central to their heartbeat of a nation and even their identity as a distinct people, that they would name their children Kavod just because the ark is stolen. Unbelievable. You've got to try to feel the weight of this if we're ever going to understand this text. Feel the sting. When Israel treats the ark lightly, they're not disrespecting furniture. They were disrespecting, they were despising the kingship that this shadow represented. They were disrespecting the substance of what this represented. You've got to feel the weight of this. To mock the ark, to mishandle the ark, to presume things on the ark was to despise the throne that it represented. It was to insult God Himself. So it's a shadow of God's throne. Let's go to the next one. I think it's a shadow of redemption. So we saw, right, the ark contained the Ten Commandments, Aaron's staff, and manna, right? But above those elements was the mercy seat. Again, you would just see this as a cover. By the way, mercy seat is translated literally cover. So it's just the cover of that ark. But why does that cover matter? It's a slab of, pure gold, overshadowed by the cherubim, as again this artist describes. And I think the point and the key is that God says, right here is where I will meet with you in Exodus 25. I'm going to meet with you here. That's interesting. Once a year, we know this story, Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, blood is sprinkled on the mercy seat. Why? This was the holiest act in Israel's calendar. Why? This was the place where a holy God could meet with a sinful people. He made a way possible. It's not by human effort, it's not by rituals. It was by the shedding of innocent blood. And this is a shadow. We see this. It's easier to see it now in our setting. We know, wow, look at this. This is pointing directly to Jesus. The mercy seat, this golden lid on the ark, this was always meant to point us to the true mercy seat, which is Jesus Himself. The ark is the place where heaven touched earth. But it was a shadow. It was a shadow of things to come. The substance came when the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Now the substance is here. Where the ark could only cover sin, Jesus removed sin completely. Last one. Oops, I was supposed to put that up. There I will meet with you. Sorry. Last one. Shadow of relationship. A little bit of overlap here, but it's kind of the same point being made. I want you to really see again that the ark was not some sort of tucked away relic. This isn't like something you put in the Israeli museum back in the day, or I guess it'd be the Israelite museum back in the day. This isn't some sort of lifeless symbol. This was the meeting place. The ark, now I want you to think about this from the meta-narrative perspective, from the full story of the Bible. The ark was a critical step forward to a renewed Garden of Eden. Think about this and remember the whole story. Before sin happens in the world, God is freely meeting with his image bearers anytime they want to. Freely. Zero issues. There's no sin to get in the way of anything. But when the sin happens in Genesis chapter 3, when the fall takes place, separation comes in. And now, what? God graciously has made a way possible again to meet with people, but now it's through barriers. And listen, and I want to be really clear on this, that is still in place today. Here's what I mean. You today cannot meet with God except through his one means, which is Jesus Christ, his Son. You have no audience with God outside of his Son. God gave humanity one way to reunite what was separated in the Garden of Eden when we engaged in that mutiny against God's throne to take it for ourselves. He made one way possible. In Samuel's day, right, what we're going to read out here in just a second, through the ark, through this, God was living amongst his people once again. Do you see this shadow of the Garden of Eden? And it's just a shadow. Because it's in barrier, but it's in covenant relationship with his people. Now, this is really cool. I think it's really fascinating when you read the whole text. God didn't do this for all people in the same way. He chose a people for himself. He didn't make himself known the same way to all people. He chose a people. He chose, in our sense, he chose a bride. And he revealed himself. And he made a way possible to be reunited. The ark was proof that God has bound himself to his promise that I will be their God and they will be my people. All of it is pointing ultimately to Jesus. So the ark, and again I want to just show this, the ark was showcasing how near God was. But in Jesus, the shadow of the ark became the substance. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. But it's this reality, and this is what I want to get to in our text today. It's this kind of central heartbeat. It's this kind of DNA shaping Ark of the Covenant. It's all of this that the Philistines stole, that they captured, and they took out of the land. Like, can you feel? It's so easy to read black and white text and go, yeah, okay, the ark was captured. Okay, cool. Oh, Eli died. Okay, good. Hey, Ichabod. Okay, yeah, okay. It's just so easy to read right past all this stuff and not see the human realities and the emotional, all of this kind of context and background and kind of weight of all of this. It's so easy to read right past it. So, do the work in your brain to feel the weight of the Ark of the Covenant and imagine, if you can, what it would be like if that was taken. Your identity is stolen from you. What do you do? This is where we left the story. We're going to pick it up right now. Where we left the story was that the Ark had been captured in battle. We already said this. Sent to the Philistine temple, and the Ark was put in front of the Philistine god named Dagon, as a captured deity. And what did God do? God showed Dagon that he was not a god. God put Dagon on his face before him. Right? The Philistines came in the morning, lifted him back up, and then God took his head off and took his hands off. God is not a rival God. God will not be a God among many, which is what a lot of people want to do. God is the only true and living God. But what happens after that? Well, then the Ark of the Covenant becomes this kind of hot potato scenario in all of the nations or all of the cities of the land of the Philistines. Goes to one city, and wherever the ark landed, plague broke out. And so it was like, get this thing out of here. And it landed at a new city, plague broke out. What does that mean? God is systematically defeating the enemies of Israel on his own. You think God needs an army? What is God that he would need anything from us? God is routing Israel's enemies, and he's doing it one city at a time. I find that fascinating. By the way, I look at these kinds of texts, and there's many. By the way, the Bible is full of many things like this. Not exactly this story, but examples of how God taking the initiative, God doing all of these kinds of crazy works, God doing all this stuff. And then I hear people in our culture, and I've kind of grown up with this statement of God only helps those who help themselves. I want to go, what Bible are you reading? Because I actually see the exact opposite in Scripture. The exact opposite. God helps those who can't help themselves. Remember, Ephesians, you were dead in your trespasses and sins. You have no hope. God made you alive. God's doing all of this work. It is all God initiated. That's where we're going to pick up the story today. The hot potato of the ark. And now the Philistines are saying, we've got enough is enough. We have to do something. Let's jump in. So we're in 6. All right, we're going to start right in verse 1. Let's read a few verses here. The ark of the Lord. I just want to, again, really quickly, what I want to do is I just kind of want to track through the text with you like we normally do, and then we'll make some observations, and then we'll put some application together and see where we go. Verse 1. The ark of the Lord was in the country of the Philistines 7 months. And the Philistines called for the priests and the diviners and said, "What shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Tell us with what we shall send it to its place." They said, "If you send away the ark of the God of Israel, do not send it empty, but by all means return him a guilt offering. Then you will be healed, and it will be known to you why his hand does not turn away from you." Now, by the way, stop there. Real quick to read 7 months, right past it, right? Doesn't hit us at all. 7 months of your identity gone? 7 months you're sitting in Israel and our entire heartbeat is gone? God with us is no longer with us? I mean, it's a bit extreme, might be over the top, but think about how you would feel if your child was missing for 7 months. Would that be a little bit of a different feeling? The ark of God, your reason for being, is gone. 7 months. It's a big deal. The Philistines call all these guys together, and they say, "What do we do with this ark?" Now, I think what we see in this little chunk right here, we see automatically that the Philistines were taught a few lessons. I find it a little bit funny because I love it when God likes to remind people that they aren't in control of absolutely anything, that He is a God that will not be trifled with. He doesn't always do that. He's long-suffering, but every once in a while He likes to flex and show His power in unique ways. This would be one of them. He taught them a lesson. Number one, Yahweh taught them a lesson that His wrath is very, very real, tangible even in their case. His wrath is palpable. You could touch it in this case. And then they said this. I think the other lesson, we might say, is that they learned you don't fight against Yahweh. You don't control Yahweh. What do? You appease Him. You appease Him. How many people in our culture today, think about this, guys. How many people today in our culture go, God's not going to tell me what to do. Look at this post. I don't usually do this, but I grabbed a Facebook post because I thought it was so pointed. And I was like, look at this post. Here's this guy. I have no idea who this is, by the way. A God who designs humans to feel pain, knowing they will be condemned to endless torture, is a psychopath. Okay? I would rather be in hell than in heaven with that God. Thankfully, that's not reality. God exists, and He is a loving heavenly Father. What is this saying? This guy needs to learn the lessons that the Philistines learned. You know what? I'm always baffled at kind of posts like this. By the way, somebody right down here in a post actually said, "What Bible are you reading?" Which I thought was a classic one-liner. You know, like, what Bible are you reading? Because that's not the Bible we see. The idea of something like this, that you are going to put God, on the, you're going to like cross-examine the King of the universe, that you're going to fight against Him. Like, how dare you do that? How dare you do anything you want with human beings at any level? You're going to put God on the hot seat? Good luck with that. You need to learn a lesson that the Philistines learned. God is not beholden to you. God is not concerned if you like Him or don't like Him. He's holy. He's sovereign. You don't fight that God. You appease that God. If this is true, and by the way, humans do feel pain, and humans will be subject to an eternity of conscious torment. Jesus' words. All the more reason to run to an escape. All the more reason to look to the one that he said, this is the means by which the wrath of God is spared in your life. You don't fight this God. You appease this God. You do what he tells you to do. But I agree with this guy. Yeah, you would rather be in hell than in heaven with a God like this. Yes, you're a God hater. What, is that like intimidating for us? That's not intimidating. Hey, you're a God hater. You're one of a billion that are God haters. I was a God hater before God made me a God lover. This is not impressive to me. God's not intimidated. But we just talk like this so much. And I was struck by this as I was thinking about the Philistines all week. And I'm thinking, man, we haven't learned anything. It's so much time has gone on and we're still dealing with the same stuff. It's all the same in principle. It's all the same. You don't fight this God. You don't try to control him. You don't try to say, I wouldn't do it that way. You appease this God. Is it fair that he gave us tumors? You appease that God. You don't talk in those any other terms. By the way, they also brought in priests and diviners. I thought that was interesting as I was just observing the text this week. Priests and diviners, two separate groups. I thought that was significant. Priests, again, to interpret the offense against God. Why? Because there's been a religious, think about it from the Philistines' perspective, there's this religious relic. They have many. They conquer all kinds of people. They have a religious relic that's been defiled. So the priest does what? He comes and he interprets the offense against the God of that relic. Here's what you guys did. And then you bring in diviners to determine what course of action to see if it's not a coincidence or not. Is this true? Is this really Yahweh doing this thing with tumors? Or is this all 5 cities a unique coincidence of some sort? Like lottery chances here. All right, let's continue. Verse 4. And they said, what is the guilt offering that we shall return to him? They answered, 5 golden tumors and 5 golden mice, according to the number of the lords of the Philistines. For the same plague was on all of you and on your lords. So you must make images of your tumors and images of your mice that ravage the land, and give glory to the God of Israel. Perhaps he will lighten his hand from off you and your gods and your land. Why should you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh hardened their hearts? After he had dealt severely with him, did they not send the people away and they departed? Now, let's stop there for a second. This is really interesting to me on a few different levels, right? So they're saying give what? They're saying give multiple representations. Give the representations of the issue, of the plague that's taking place here. They believe that Yahweh was responsible for this plague. But what they're doing is they are acknowledging that Yahweh is superior in power to Dagon. They're having to acknowledge it now, and they're trying to figure out a way to curb Yahweh's anger in this acknowledgement. How do we deal with this? And then they give a reference to Egypt, which I thought was fascinating, right? They didn't just say, hey, Yahweh's doing this, appease him. They say, hey, recall what happened. By the way, we know this is centuries later. Centuries. Now think about that for a second. Think of the ripple effect of the Exodus and what it did to not only Egypt itself, but to the surrounding nations. Everybody knows that story. What a humiliating reality for Egypt back in that day. So much so that even centuries later, a Philistine diviner is saying, don't be like Egypt. Learn from Egypt. What did they do? They hardened their hearts. They tried to fight Yahweh. You don't fight Yahweh. You appease Yahweh. That's what you do. They fought him. Learn from them. All their armies decimated. And the people still left, and they took all their riches with them. We're not fighting this. You're not going to win against this God who's giving us tumors. This isn't going to happen. You don't fight. You appease. Don't be dumb like Egypt. Learn from them. I found that fascinating. that was still, hundreds of years later, that was still rippling through the region as something to be lived out in a different way than Pharaoh himself. Let's continue on 7. Now then, take and prepare a new cart and 2 milk cows on which there has never come a yoke, and yoke the cows to the cart, but take their calves home away from them. And take the ark of the Lord and place it on the cart and put it in a box at its side, and the figures of gold, which you are returning to him as a guilt offering. Then send it off and let it go its way. And watch. If it goes up on the way to its own land, to Bet Shemesh, then it is he who has done us this great harm. But if not, then we shall know that it is not from his hand that struck us. It happened to us by coincidence. Okay, this is really interesting. Do you see what they're doing? Do you see what they're doing? They're trying to stack the deck against Yahweh here. What are they going to stack the deck? Well, what do? First of all, a new cart. Why a new cart? Who cares? Unfamiliar material with these cows. 2 milk cows, I thought this was interesting, that have never been yoked. Unfamiliar setting for these cows. This is not their norm. These are not cows that they're pulling out of the field. They're used to plowing fields. This is brand new stuff. They're going to yoke these cows. They're going to attach them to a cart, which is unfamiliar work for them. They're going to then remove their calves from them, which is unnatural instinct for these cows, especially as they're milking. And then they're going to see if they go up to Bet Shemesh. By the way, I find it fascinating, right? Bet Shemesh, you can go there. We actually used to live, when we lived in Jerusalem, we used to live about 15 minutes outside of Bet Shemesh. And by the way, Shemesh in Hebrew is son, and Bet is house, so it's the house of the sun. And it's still a town today, kind of a modern town today. But if you know that from Ekron, which is down at the coast, Bet Shemesh is up and it's on a hill. It's an uphill travel. So you see what they're doing? Okay, new cart, new cows, take their young away, because that's their natural instinct. They're going to want to go to those young. And you're going to put them onto this new yoke. You're going to attach them to this thing, and you're going to send them uphill. We're stacking the deck against Yahweh here. See what happens. Why? Why go to such great lengths? Tumors aren't enough for you guys? When somebody in the room, like in the meeting, going like, you guys want more tumors? Like, what's the problem here? Get rid of this thing. Why go to this length? Why? I think you have to feel the humiliation. They just got done putting the ark. They conquered this people. They put it in their temple. And now they're being defeated by a God they can't see. And they have to make this public pronouncement because 7 months has gone by and their people are getting killed. And eventually this ark is going to destroy them completely. So we have to do something. We have to get rid of it. They can't just destroy the ark. They don't know. They think that would incur more wrath, so they don't know what to do. So they're like, let's do this. But then they say, let's do this final test, just to be sure we're not losing our minds here. Because we're about to do something completely humiliating. What are we going to do? We're going to give back a religious relic. And that's a public acknowledgement that our God is inferior to this God. And we're going to do it publicly here. So let's be sure. One last test before we go public. And let's stack the deck and see if it turns uphill to Bet Shemesh. And what happens? You might know the story. 10. Oops, sorry, I lost my place. Here we go, 10. The men did so. And 2 milk cows and took 2 milk cows and yoked them to the cart and shut up their calves at home. And they put the ark of the Lord on the cart and the box with the golden mice and the images of their tumors. And the cows went straight in the direction of Bet Shemesh along one highway, lowing as they went. They turned neither to the right nor to the left, and the lords of the Philistines went after them as far as the border of Bet Shemesh. Okay, so they put God to the test one last time, and then what does God do? They stack the deck against him, and what they didn't realize, one factor they had not, factored into all of this, is that Yahweh controls even the instincts of beasts to give himself glory. That ark was going home, Jack. That's the point. That ark was going home. This is not by chance. It's not by human strategy or something. This was divine sovereignty. And right there, you have this dusty road from Ekron down in the south, it's to the west, but you have Ekron down at the coast, and then you're going uphill to Bet Shemesh. The shadow of the ark was doing what all shadows are supposed to do, and that is point beyond itself to something greater, to the substance. What was God doing? He was preaching a sermon with each one of those steps from those cows. And what was the message? My will is not bound by men, by nations, not even by nature itself. My will be done. And we know that all of this finds its substance in the person of Jesus Christ. Everything we're talking about here finds its purpose in the substance of Jesus Christ. You see, the ark, the true ark, right? The real meeting place between heaven and between earth is not some, gold-covered box. It's flesh-covered divinity. That's where heaven meets earth. The Word became flesh. Christ is the substance that every other shadow has been pointing to since the Garden of Eden. Look at the law that was in the ark. He fulfilled it. The staff of Aaron that was in the ark. He is the great high priest that we need as our mediator. The manna, he himself called himself the bread of heaven that was given for the life of the world. And here's what I want to say to us, and this is the point, I think, ultimately. Here's the point. You and I, what do we take? Maybe the better question is to say, what do we take from a Philistine story like this? Today, 2025. I think here's one point that we can go. Here's one lane. Let's walk down this lane. You and I, we live in a shadow land. You live in a shadow land. And here's what I mean. Once you see that, everything that there is pointing beyond itself. Once you see that you live in a world that is designed to do nothing but point beyond itself, if you see that, your life will go in a radical different direction. It'll take on an entirely new approach. Every good gift you have been given, and you've been given many, every good gift is meant to point beyond itself. Your work, how does your work do that? Your work is a shadow of God's ultimate kingdom purposes that are being done. Your marriage, it's a shadow. How is it a shadow? It's a shadow of Christ's bride and his marriage that will last for all of eternity. Your home is a shadow. How? Your home points forward to that day, and that day is coming when, especially Christians in the room, you will live in your Father's house. When Jesus said there are many rooms. Your country that you live in, it's a shadow. There's a much better country that's coming where we're going to live with God face to face. The church in general, it's a shadow of that final gathering when every tribe, tongue, and nation will worship the King in spirit and in truth and in face to face. But here's the danger that we face. Here's our trouble. Listen here. Here's our danger in this shadow land. We have a tendency to settle for the shadow. We love, maybe even worship. We worship shadows. We act like they're the substance, right? We turn God's good gifts around. Good gifts, money, work, family, your home. We said our country, our church itself. We turn those things into these little gods. We live like the shadows are the substance. And that, my friends, is called idolatry. And we need to learn a lesson from Israel. We need to learn a lesson from the Philistines. We need to learn the lesson that they had to learn. And here's the point of the whole message right here. Here's the point. God will not share his glory with shadows. God will never share his glory with shadows. Don't act like the shadow is the point. Everything you have is pointing beyond itself. What shadows are you struggling with right now? You got shadows as your focal point? Our call today is so simple. Out of this text is so simple. Honor the shadows. God given us real shadows. They're good gifts from him. Honor the shadows, but worship the substance. That's the point. Honor the shadows. Who's going to pretend that we don't have things that point to other things? These are all good gifts from God, right? But every day, there will be a day, that every single shadow will fade. But until that day, especially Christians in the room, listen, until that day, we have to live as a people that understands the difference between shadow and substance. How often are we living like the world and we're pretending like the shadow is the whole point? And we worship that thing. How often? Shadows are good. They're God-given. Kept in their proper place, they're healthy. They're pointing us beyond ourselves. They're given to us for a reason, but don't worship them. Don't worship the shadow. Worship the King of the universe, who is the substance of heaven. And that's King Jesus. That's our call. That's your call. Don't worship the shadow. Worship the substance. Let's pray.